Welcome to the BlackInCompBio podcast. We are your hosts, Janae Adams and Melissa Minto. Today we have Dr. Javan Carter, a bioinformatics scientist at RTI International. He has had various roles in academia, industry, and now nonprofit. Javan Carter is a bioinformatics scientist at RTI, known for his expertise in phylogenomic analysis, programming languages, genomic ancestry, and genomic bioinformatics tools. With a diverse career trajectory, he has held positions as a head microbiologist at Sabra, a bioinformatic analyst at IQVIA, and served in academia as an adjunct professor at both the University of Colorado Boulder and Wake Tech Community College. Driven by a passion for education, Dr. Carter is also a Researcher Academy instructor at RTI, contributing to the All of Us database. And through his diverse experiences and expertise, Dr. Carter has established himself as a highly skilled bioinformatics scientist, making significant contributions to the field and advancing scientific research in areas such as thrombosis, opioid addiction, and type 1 diabetes. Welcome, Dr. Carter.
It is really weird to hear that stuff out loud. It's one thing to have it on paper. It's nothing to have it out loud. It seems weird, but it sounds nice.
Yeah. You're very well accomplished. You have lots of experiences in different areas of STEM and science. So we're excited to learn more about your journey, how you navigated it, and your thoughts. But before we get into that, I'm going to start off with some science trivia. With your graduate work in evolutionary biology, we think that this question is very fitting. Okay, so question. This animal's fingerprints closely resembles that of a human's, so much so, in fact, that inspecting its fingerprints side by side with a human print makes it impossible to differentiate. What animal is it?
The chimpanzee?
No.
Really?
No.
That was also my guess.
I was like, well, we share 98%, but okay.
Do you want a second guess?
I do want a second guess. Is it an orangutan?
Nope.
Oh man. All right. I feel like you're going to tell me
I
that.
honestly don't even know the answer. What's the answer?
It's a koala.
What?
Okay. I was never expect that. All right. Well, I got to put
just the fingerprints and nothing else.
I guess so. I don't know about everything else, but it's a koala that has an indistinguishable fingerprint from a human. So keep that in the back of your mind for activities.
That is weird.
Yeah, so I think we can start off with hearing more about your background. Basically, let's focus on how did you get to where you are today? When did you realize that science was the field you wanted to pursue?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll probably have to say when I was in fourth grade, it was third and fourth grade. I'm really not studious, never have been. Probably never will be, which is always weird to say to people because well, you have a PhD. It's I know, but I'm not a good student per se. And I remember the only class that I was actually okay at, if not decent at, was science. And only reason why that was because everything kind of made a lot of sense. English doesn't make sense to me because there's so many inconsistencies and English doesn't follow its own rules. History makes sense to me to a certain degree, but then at the same time, it doesn't make sense because why would you ever repeat yourself that many times? But history has a knack of doing that. And I'm like, why don't we ever learn from our history? We don't. And then when it comes down to mathematics, that did actually make a lot of sense to me, but I am terrible at math because of multiple different reasons, but I'm not the best at math, so I never felt very comfortable with it. Hence why science was just one of those fields where I actually did feel comfortable, and it allowed me to make sense of some of the other fields, the beginning or end of certain terms in science always makes sense. When it comes down to understanding history, evolutionary biology, that makes a lot more sense to me. And then on top of that, when you're thinking about like math and applying the math to something, that makes more sense to me. So science was always like that link.
So did you know what bioinformatics was early on? How did you encounter that?
I had no idea what bioinformatics was. Like, I think most people, I think it's one of those things where for me personally, I kind of like stumbled onto it. I had no idea people even use computers this way until I got to graduate school. Because even when I was an undergraduate, I did research and everything like that. But I was typically, the research I was doing was more hands-on and wasn't wet lab oriented and not computational. So I didn't figure that out until I got to grad school. Even in grad school, it was interesting because my principal investigator, she did not do bioinformatics. She knew of it and everything, but she didn't do it. And a lot of professors didn't do it. They're very, I'm not going to use the word old school because that's definitely not terminology, but they're more hands-on and applicational. There was, I think, 6 professors who did more bioinformatic-esque things in our department. So it was interesting. But no, to answer your question, I did not know at all until probably the middle or end of my first year in grad school. And that's when I realized that I was going to not do like physical, like, going out and doing experiments. So more like ecological or like practical evolutionary experiments. And I was going to be doing more, not necessarily theoretical, but applying it on a genetic framework.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of described how you chose kind of bioinformatics as a career path. I'm wondering, since you have experience in both like traditional academia and industry, how those two different environments differ and what you've found to be rewarding in both or challenges.
So like the cross section between industry and academia in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, I think, well, where I'm currently at is kind of weird because it has this academic feel to it, even though it's still more like very much so industry. So it's a really weird area. I know that in the traditional sense, you're not doing empirical research in industry. I think a lot of the companies, at least the ones that I've looked into, the main thing that you'll be doing, at least again, from my perspective, is like optimizing things and getting things ready to go for clients. You'll be doing research per se, but then it's not your job to interpret the results or anything like that. It's your job to do the analysis. And then after that, it's somebody else's job to interpret the results and then yell at you and ask you a million questions on exactly what you did for your analyses, which I have had experiences with that. It's not the funnest thing, but everybody's different. But of course, in academia, the main thing is, I'm my own boss. I can make my own hours and I can set all this stuff out and I can ask all these questions, which is all fine and good. But then the downside to that is, you do have hours because you're typically teaching somebody. So you do have some set of hours. And on top of that, you got to constantly keep trying to get money all the time. And if you don't do that and you don't produce papers and you don't push out grad students, then people start wondering what you've been doing. You could have been doing awesome research, but if you're not actually like doing those things, then people start staring at you. And that pressure to achieve and become an overachiever in that sense is a lot. So luckily in industry, especially where I'm currently at, that's not the case. And the things that we focus in on, at least at like RTI, are things where, the percentage or the likelihood of you actually getting grants and things like and contracts to do your empirical research is rather high. For where I came from to now, because of course I came from like the evolution ecology background, and we worked off of NSF, so National Science Foundation money, and that is nowhere near as big as NIH money. Those are, you basically looking like a cup of water versus like a swimming pool when it comes out.
Yeah.
Javan and I do work at the same place and for the same, like in the same group. We both work in the Genomics Translational Research Center at RTI International. It's a new name change, which is why it took a little bit to get that out. But yeah, we don't work on all the same projects. I think the things that we share are the opioid research that we do. So can you talk a little bit about the types of projects that you're working on at RTI? And yeah, what are you most excited about in terms of the different research that you're doing?
So yeah, I have to pull up my CV for that one. I'm always forgetting something. Okay, so yeah, I work on opioid research, more of like a training platform for me because, of course, as you already know, we're double dabbling in transcriptomics and this meta-analysis, and these are new territories because the research that I typically do, or at least I used to do, was more evolutionary focused. So, obviously genomics, things like that. You can infer evolution using transcriptomics, but I think that'd be extremely difficult, and I think it'd be very, very interesting because it's not like a clear breakdown as to like what was inferred and what was expressed in the past versus the present, but you can at least look at your DNA and assume what's going on based off mutation rates and whatnot. But anyway, yes, opioid meta-analysis project. And then the other ones that I'm working on are like the type 1 diabetes research, and that's with the early check group. And what I'm basically doing is calculating PRS and GRSs, so polygenic risk scores / genetic risk scores, depending on who you talk to and what argument they want to say on which one you define as what. But essentially calculating polygenic risk scores using whole genome sequence data and trying to infer the risk of infants at birth if they, might or might not have, the likelihood of them actually developing that phenotype. Another project I'm working on is the estrogen project, basically doing a GWAS on individuals with thrombosis, or at least characteristics associated with thrombosis, which is just blood clotting. And these individuals hopefully should have been exposed to estrogen or higher levels of estrogen because they're taking birth control versus people who are not, and kind of running that route and trying to assess certain groups of genes and see if there are any associations between those. And then the last project that I'm working on is the All of Us Researcher Academy. And that's the one where I'm working with HBCUs and trying to basically get those PIs, those postdocs and grad students kind of like up to par so that they can feel comfortable and good with using the researcher workbench for the All of Us database. And that one is pretty fulfilling just because I get to actually go back to what I used to do in the past, which was kind of, a little bit more diversity and inclusion type things, but applying it with a scientific lens, so to speak. So I'm actually like that one the most, which is kind of weird because it's not actually research per se. It's helping other people do research, but I feel more fulfilled.
I think there's a really nice diversity in what you have been able to work on. And I think on the surface, most people would say, oh, like I could do this in a lot of different institutions or places. But my next question is, how do you feel that the nonprofit research institute structure specifically kind of contributes to you achieving the goals you've set forth? And I'm asking because I would want someone to have more insight into why they might be more attracted to nonprofit research institutes as opposed to other types of corporate structures.
Okay. So I guess I have to first break down my interpretation, or at least my understanding of how it works at my company as far as like the title nonprofit. Because originally, like, a few years ago, if you were to ask me a nonprofit versus a for-profit company, I'm like, okay, well, a nonprofit is like some building off to the side, doing its own thing. Everybody kind of struggling, but everybody's happy because, the money's all going towards a good place. A for-profit is, everybody's money hungry and CEOs making $2 billion a year, whatever. So that's like my general breakdown. And as you can tell, I was a little all over the place back then, but, that's just how it was in my head. Now, from what I understand, the main difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit is basically money caps. Certain places, like especially executives and above, they have a money cap, and like the board of directors and things like that, they all have money caps, and they can't exceed a certain amount as far as like salaries. That's not to say they're not making a crazy amount of money. It just means that the money, there is a cap on it, and then the rest of that money has to go back into the company in and of itself. That's why it's called a nonprofit. Because again, if it was a for-profit, you can, in theory, have those CEOs making, $5 million, $10 million, $20 million every year. While you have other people who are begging for increases in their salary, but they won't give it to them. But with that being said, RTI, I think, is a very interesting area, at least where I'm working out within RTI, because number one, it's huge. There are areas of RTI where it feels like a normal company and it runs like a normal company. But then where I'm at, the research that I'm doing, it kind of has that weird sense of, this is a university, because you have this person who's kind of like the PI, and then you're a postdoc, and you have some people who are not necessarily postdocs, more like grad students. Like, they have used these analogies a few times. And I know it got to the point where I'm just kind of like normal to it now. I'm like, okay, so I'm like a postdoc. All right, I can do that. I can do that. That's fine. As long as I'm hopefully making a little bit more postdoc money, I'm okay with that. But for anybody who's looking into either or, I think this is more of a unique situation. But I would say, use that description. That might help you out, because if you have any, for people who are like just double dabbling trying to find where they fit, if you have any reservations about, companies that have huge divides within like their money breakdown or the money structure, and or if you, I would just say like the incentives for a nonprofit, a lot of the incentives are surrounding the people who work within it, because again, the money has to go back into the company somehow. So, and since that's already the case, what better way to use the money than to help your employees feel comfortable there? Whereas a for-profit, they don't have to do any of that. They just choose to, or they don't choose to. So that might be one factor, like your overall like comfort in life and your overall like mental health, things like those things could be more focused in on at a nonprofit, but I'm not entirely sure, because I'm only one. I'm like a sample size of one in the grand scheme of things.
I think RTI has it, and specifically for like the group that we work under, I feel like it has more of a academic feel with an industry pace. I feel like we're kind of spread across a lot of projects, but they're more academic driven. Like, we are interested in the interpretations and the findings versus like, let me just analyze this data. And in terms of giving back to the company, or the company, pouring back into itself, you see that in a lot of like the professional development that's like emphasized there. I feel like a lot of the conversations I have with my manager, or a lot of the things that I see like coming out of RTI is like, all right, what do you want to do next? Or how can we support you do this? And how are you going to meet these goals that you've set for yourself? And so I think it has a very good culture in terms of like trying to make you the best researcher, scientist that you want to be.
So since we're talking about sort of the learning environment, Javan, what did you go to school for, and how have your research interests shaped or shifted since finding grad school to now?
All right. So this might be a little bit of a long-winded. I can just feel it over the horizon. I'm telling you right now.
Sure.
Okay. So, man, it all started when I was a kid. No, I'm just playing. So basically what happened was, like, I went to school for biology, and it was the traditional route. And I'm gonna say traditional because this is what happens to like 60%, 80% of the people who actually go in for biology. They all trying to go to pre-med. That's the thing. Oh, why are you a biology man? You trying to go? You gonna be a doctor? Yeah, I'm gonna be a doctor. I'm gonna take over the world. I'm gonna be a doctor. I'm gonna go to I'm gonna go to medical school. I'm gonna do it. Didn't even know what grad school was at the time. I just knew of medical school. But then, like so many of us, you do your first year and you start reassessing a lot of things. Oh man, that GPA is not where I want it to be.
Yeah.
I gotta take how many more chemistry classes? I don't know how this is about to go well. Like, I just don't know how to go down. So yeah, you start counting them eggs, and it's one of those things where I actually did jump around a little bit, and I think the main reason why I jumped around is because I just got scared. So a little bit about me, I have always had really bad imposter syndrome. It's just how it is, and at this point, it ain't gonna go away. I already know that for a fact. At my age, it ain't going away. Yeah, all I can do is just work on not letting it overcome me or overwhelm me. But when I was an undergraduate, I used to basically every semester I assumed I was gonna get kicked out because of bad grades or something, and I didn't even have bad grades. I mean, I had like B's and C's and stuff as an undergraduate most of the time, but it was just one of those things where I just assumed that there was just going to be one class that kicks my butt and they're just going to kick me out. The semester before I actually like graduated, I was just like, okay, now I was obviously wrong the last 3 years, but this is going to be the year that they're going to find me out and realize that I'm just actually too dumb to figure this stuff out. And on top of that, it was even more crazy because people always pushed about how hard biology was and how hard the STEM field was. So for me, I was like, okay, I'm obviously not going to be able to finish this thing up. I'm obviously not going to be able to go in medical school. And I also, at that point in time, towards the end of my undergraduate, I already started thinking about grad school more because I had a mentor who kind of really pushed me to consider graduate school. So I already kind of switched things up. So I had an idea, like if I were to go to medical school, this is what it would look like. If I was going to go to graduate school, this is going to look like. But I wasn't going to get to that point because I was going to graduate. And then I graduated and I was like, okay, cool. Well, what am I supposed to do now? So I applied for grad school and I didn't even apply for medical school because I saw my GPA when I was done. I was kind of pushing toward the very end, like if something were to change. It didn't change. It was a good GPA, but it wasn't no 3.8, which is basically what you need at the minimum. So yeah, I went ahead and applied for grad school. Did not get in the first time around. I applied to 3 schools and I didn't get into any of them because I had really bad GRE scores. I'm not a really good test taker, like I think a lot of people, but standardized.
For the record, the GRE is horrible, and I also had a horrible experience.
Oh no, it is bad.
We come back to that later, but
and it doesn't assess you whatsoever on your capabilities of being like a successful grad student and beyond. It really doesn't. It's just honestly to me like a kind of like a cash grab to snatch up as much money as you can because there's like a $300 test and you have to pay at least over $100 on like the material to study for the test. But that's a whole nother time conversation. But so yeah, I didn't get in the first time around to the schools I wanted to apply for. And the funny thing was that I wanted to apply to University of Colorado because the guy who really pushed me to go into graduate school, Dr. Doug Mills, he kept emphasizing that would be a great program for me. And I was like, I'm probably too dumb to get into that school, so I'm not going to apply for it because I don't want to disappoint myself. But then after I didn't get into the first 3 schools I applied for, I had to wait another year. And I was like, well, I guess I might as well apply for it this time around and like just shoot my shot on it and see what happens. In the meantime of me doing that and like reapplying for grad school multiple times, I worked as a high school teacher and I worked as a microbiologist after the high school teacher job, just because teaching in high school is not the most fun thing on earth. But it was around the time when I was doing the microbiology job. That's when I actually did get accepted into the grad school at University of Colorado Boulder, and I went there for my PhD. I had the choice between that or a master's degree at University of William & Mary, and I strictly only applied to William & Mary because it was a pretty interesting program. But the main reason why was because my wife went to William & Mary as an undergraduate, and she didn't really rub it in my face, but she definitely kept pushing about how amazing that school was. And I hated that school because she kept on, because I don't know, she almost like she was bragging about it. So I was like, I'm going to see if I can get in just to prove to myself that I'm able to at least get into this school. Maybe we'll see. And the fact that I got into it made me feel really good. So if I didn't get to William Mary, University of Colorado Boulder, I would have definitely went to William Mary. But fast forward, got to Colorado.
Yeah.
And, got to Colorado, and I was there for 4.5 years. That's how long it took me to get my PhD, which I know sounds kind of fast in comparison to other people. But at the same time, when COVID kicked off, it actually helped me focus even more than before. So I was actually able to do a lot more work at that point in time. But yeah, I went to that program and I liked evolutionary biology at that point in time because I learned about it as my undergraduate. And it was just one of those things where it allowed me to understand everything on a fundamental scale, because with evolutionary biology, it explains to you more or less why the weirdness that you see in biology is the weirdness that you see in biology. It breaks down you have natural selection. So this is why this organism looks like this, because in this environment, this is advantageous. This is going to be the traits that are needed to survive and thrive. Whereas in this organism, why does this look weird? Well, because it was going through natural selection, and then some crazy freak situation happened and genetic drift took place. And now it's a little weird, but at the same time, that's the reason why it looks completely different than all its cousins nearby it. Mm-hmm. Same thing with sexual selection. Why do we always have this going on with these organisms? Well, that's because the males are fighting over females, and the females are basically dictating the overall outcome of due to selective pressure. They're basically interested in certain traits. So the males that have those certain traits are overly expressed, overly exposed inside, or I guess overly emphasized in the population. Mm-hmm. And it just explains a lot out to me. And it even explains out courting rituals and things like that. And just stuff you just didn't really think too much about, even behavior and why you even act the way you act. It kind of breaks it all down in a certain way. There's a lot of, obviously we're very complicated. A lot of organisms are very complicated, but on a very simple level, it gives you an idea. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's how I got into there. And then of course, in order to understand evolutionary biology and understand organisms and how they evolved, you have to look at their DNA, more or less. We originally thought it was just, you can count the feathers on a bird, or you can keep on assessing the height of something. And then if you keep looking at that phenotype, you'll understand it better. It's to a certain degree, but you have to look at the DNA to really get down to the nitty gritty of what's going on. And in order to look at DNA, especially gigabytes versus gigabytes worth of data, you're going to have to learn how to do bioinformatics and learn how to code. So I taught myself how to code in Bash and R and a little bit I think it was just Bash and R. And then fast forward, since I can code and I can understand DNA and I understand the process of cleaning up DNA and interpreting DNA, moving forward into where I'm at right now, that's essentially what was transferable. So when you're in grad school, you're essentially just building a toolbox of information or a toolbox of skill sets that you can hopefully be able to use the tools in different capacities and ways. And I chose to use bioinformatics as my tools, so I can easily, or at least hopefully easily, get a job outside of it. Whereas I do know that there are some people who pick tools and skills, unfortunately, that are very, very, very niche specific, which is great if you're staying within academia, but it does make it a little difficult when you're actually looking for jobs outside of academia. So I try to stick to things that other people might actually find advantageous and beneficial. And since humans have DNA, it was very, very
Yeah. But it is definitely a good picture at kind of where you were in your skill sets, some challenges that you face and how you've had to adjust to that, and kind of how science and even your way of approaching scientific questions has kind of grown alongside that. So yeah, I took several notes about imposter syndrome, about also being in an environment where people are telling you that you won't succeed because something is hard, like something I feel like a lot of us experience more than maybe others. And just how, even though you may not have had computational biology at the forefront of your mind from the beginning, there was kind of just that inherent need to understand large amounts of data and be able to kind of take ownership over your scientific analyses in that way. So yeah, it is kind of, I feel like, in the past, it was easy to kind of be siloed more on just generating tons of data. But now, these days, I feel like, it is so important, even if someone isn't a full-time computational biologist, for people to understand their data and the life cycle of it and how it's impacting research. So yeah, thank you for emphasizing that.
Yeah, so I feel like undergrad programs are now incorporating more bioinformatics or even just like statistical coding in their courses now. But I'm curious to know how you self-taught, like what are some resources that you thought were super helpful in learning R or Bash or, any other computational biology tools?
So I'm definitely a doer and a visual learner. And I know those are kind of like old descriptors. I know that everybody's more complicated than that. But at the same time, for me, in order for me to understand it or at least learn something, I need to actually physically experience it. That's for like work-related stuff. Emotionally, I'm very complicated, but in a good way. So I can put myself in people's shoes really, really well. I don't have to experience getting slapped to understand that getting slapped doesn't make me feel good. Yeah, but fair. I want you to, I think that. But basically, for right off the bat, my PI had a lot of data, and it's funny because she couldn't really break it down or utilize it, but she had it available, and she had all these whole genome sequence data that she spent a lot of money on. So when I got into my program, she was like, well, yeah, I got this information. I got all this data available. If you want to learn how to do this, you can use this data and do your PhD off of this. So initially, I just started trying my best to either take courses, which they're very limited in my department, especially at that time. I think they've actually kind of grown since then, but take courses in bioinformatics / just like genomics, and also take courses and talk to PIs who I knew at least knew the information, or other grad students or postdocs who knew the information. So for me personally, the main thing I would say my strength was actually looking and finding people who knew how to do the skills, that knew the analyses, that knew what to do, and bugging them all the time. That was like my thing. And the interesting thing was, since I'm such an extrovert anyway, surprisingly, it was just, I don't know, it was really easy for me. I basically just ran down the hall and like, hey, you here? Cool. I got this error and I don't know what this is, but I need your help. Can you please help me out? Please, please, please. I'll buy you something. I don't care. I don't got a lot of money, but I'm gonna find something to buy you. Please help me out. And people would just be like, oh yeah, man, they'll be really willing to help me out. So that was actually the main way I learned, was trying, error, finding somebody who can answer, who helped me out. And if people couldn't help me out, then I'll go to the internet. But Stack Overflow is terrible for people who are beginning. So I always recommend maybe just try to take some courses, but the courses won't do you justice if you are somebody who has to like do it on your own data. And the other thing is, for me personally, I can take a course in something, but if I can't actually like apply it to what I'm currently doing, I won't understand it as well versus, again, just applying it to what I'm currently doing. So that's one of the other reasons why a lot of the research I'm doing right now is a little bit all over the place. It has an underlining theme, but it's a little all over the place because I'm trying to learn a lot more complex analyses right now. But the best way, again, for me to learn it is for me to do it. And I kind of hold myself accountable to make sure I understand it, and I try my best to learn it in the best practice type scenario. So yeah, unfortunately, I kind of wish I was like a computer science background, had a computer science background, and then I kind of went into biology because I think it would have been a little bit easier versus being biology focused, but then computer science is a little bit more on the background in my head. But I don't know. So far, so good. I'm still kicking it. So,
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people in the comp bio space are like that. Like if they come in with the biology side, they're like, dang, I wish I knew more computer science, and vice versa. I definitely feel the same way. I wish that I knew. Well, I feel like I know the computer science I need to know, but I wish I was, a little bit more quicker with it.
Yeah. I feel like there's always something I feel like this is going to be missing, and I really just want to be at peace with where I am. It's so interesting because this might be relevant, but there's like this Reddit post going around on this bioinformatics thread or subreddit. I don't know how Reddit works, but I use it sometimes. And it's like the title of it was, "When will I finally be competent in bioinformatics?" And they were just kind of like, it was kind of like a journal entry on just like, I never feel like I know enough of literally anything. And even though I know, the beginnings of these different pockets of different areas, I feel like that just makes me focus so much more on what I just don't know. And like, I don't know. Do you guys, I mean, yes, the answer is yes. We kind of all feel that way, but like, when do you feel like you're going to not?
So on that topic in particular, it's funny because I feel like out of all the fields, like if you were to look at like chemistry, I don't think chemistry moves as fast as like bioinformatics. Like we still have the same amount of elements that we've had back then, and we might have added a few more to them, but even those elements are super unstable. And them things, when I say unstable, I mean like it was created and then it destroys itself within like a few seconds. Like, ooh, I put a new element. It's like, yeah, whatever. Ain't a lot of places on the periodic table anyway. So, but for bioinformatics, it's like every 2 years, a software becomes irrelevant, and then a new one is like using the ABC method. Nah, man, it's all about the CDE method. It's like, what? When did that come out? 2022. What? That's just last year. But everybody in the field's using that. How's everybody in the field? Trust me, no reviewer is going to look at your paper unless you have the whatever method I just said, CDE method. That's like the thing. So like I feel like you're never going to feel like you have a grip on things because it's evolving faster than we can even keep up half the time. And of course, with like machine learning and things like that, again, it's always something new. And even how you interpret that is always new. The good thing about at least how I grew up, how I developed my bioinformatics skills, is that it was through the evolutionary biology framework. And with that one, that is really old school. Like things don't change in evolutionary biology except for maybe like every 10 years. Literally, there's I can look back every decade or so and tell you like the fundamental shift that happened in everybody's mind as far as how to interpret this stuff in that lens. Mm-hmm. So for me, I just had to apply the computational side of things just enough to make sure I interpret it that way. You go into humans and you start dibble dabbling and all this other stuff. No, those things are also constantly changing. So I agree with you and I sympathize with everybody who feels that way. I think in this field, it's just not going to get better. Not for a little while.
I feel like there's new tools constantly coming out, but I think, and this is my hope, I hope that like when I get to the point of being able to like look at a method and kind of inherently know like, oh, that's a good method, or like I see what they did there versus all right, this is a new tool, I guess I'll try it out, see what works. I feel like when I get to the point where I can like evaluate a new method based off of like, intuition of what I know and like reading it and see how it works and being like, oh yeah, that's a good tool. I feel like I'll make it. Not there yet, but I feel like that's the point where I feel like I made it.
I think that you are already there in a lot of areas. I mean, we were just talking about cell-side deconvolution, and you were like, you were like, yeah. I mean, we were talking about some of the methods other studies were using, and you were like, yeah, I disagree with these methods, and a lot of people agree with what you were saying. And I'm like, I think you're definitely further along than you think you are in a lot of ways. And I feel like maybe that could be another thing. Maybe the fact that we are all in a field that moves so fast that we always feel like we're behind, but in actuality, we're a lot more up to date and like knowledgeable than what we think. Probably for y'all. I don't know about me, but definitely for y'all. Probably for y'all.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I feel like any topic that even remotely intersects with machine learning, it's just like pick something to focus on. And if you haven't read 20 papers within the last 24 hours, then you blink and you miss it, So it's just like, I feel like at some point I'm working on, just becoming comfortable with like my skill set, just like you emphasized earlier. I guess for people that might be worried about, I don't know, researching something that is quote unquote out of date or how do you stay up on the latest research? I mean, those transferable skills of like, actually the programming and understanding how to think about methods and approaches from a computational perspective, then, maybe you can just focus on, applying that to different problems. And I think that my perspective is like, maybe that is why people think coming in from the computational end is better than the life science end, because you have the skills to do literally everything, almost everything we need to do, right? Yeah. For instance, statisticians are not always necessarily the best programmers per se, or they may not necessarily have that extensive computer science experience. So, we're all coming in with our strengths and weaknesses.
I think you gotta sit back and look at what you actually can do and just like basically look at yourself in the mirror. I'm like, okay, look, you're a computational biologist. First of all, say that really fast. That's a big title. That's the first thing. Second thing, you understand biology, which is a STEM field, which is, I think, still considered the hard STEM. And that's difficult. But you understand that, and you understand how to code. That's something else that people don't really get the grasp on. And you picked a career where it was both of them intersecting each other, like in this perfect dance. You're doing stuff that's really complicated and really complex. You are an awesome person. I'm not saying awesome people are only people who do complicated stuff, but you definitely chose some really interesting, cool stuff that requires a lot of brain power to process and get through. So, like, you know what I'm saying? You got to pat yourself on the back, like, yeah, man, you're killing it. So, no, you might not be as caught up as like whatever machine learning things going on, but you also doing a whole lot of cool stuff right now. And honestly, the things that you're probably doing, again, high level, and on top of that, probably still having a very high impact, whether we're doing machine learning or not, or whatever the other methods. So I think that's something else we probably need to do a little bit more, kind of just appreciate the fact that we're kicking butt at something that not a lot of people can probably do. Or at least not a lot of people maybe want to. I don't know.
I did want to come back to kind of the community and scientific engagement to talk about your connections with HBCUs. So my one question is, just in your experience, how can we build better bridges between, training programs and frameworks at HBCUs? Do you feel like you're only able to do what you're doing through your place of work, or are there other community initiatives that could be explored?
So I don't know. I'm a little bit of an odd duck in the grand scheme of things, because these are things that I've been doing for a long time. When I was an undergraduate, I was something called a biology ambassador, and I would basically talk to people and talk to parents and talk to students. And of course, the school I went to was very diverse, just throwing it out there. But I was definitely working with people and working with like brand new undergraduates and making them feel comfortable. And something I really wanted to do is make sure people who look real similar to me feel very comfortable and felt like they can actually, like, achieve whatever they wanted to achieve. Because I know, like I said, the imposter syndrome is real. At that time, I didn't even know what that was. I just thought that I was just a weirdo. But I like doing that. And then when I went to grad school, when I was a high school teacher, I was working at an inner city school, which kind of further fueled my fire. And then while I was doing that, I was also volunteering at elementary schools, helping kids learn how to read, which of course they're all inner city schools at the same time, because I don't know really why I kept pushing and gravitating towards that, but that's just the things I like to do. I just like help teach people and help people feel good. Maybe because I wanted more of that, so I don't like people feeling that way. But it was the same thing when I went to grad school, because I used to volunteer at science fairs at schools, and obviously it's Colorado, so there's a lot less people of diverse backgrounds there, like a lot of people who are, barely anybody who's like that. But I definitely founded or helped found a group called STEM Roots, which is all like minority-based grad students helping like minority undergraduates get into grad school. And we basically did seminars and put together events and things like that, to the point where we got like this presidential award, and that was pretty awesome. And then of course, I was also I was also teaching a lot, and I was also a tutor and things like that. And of course now, and then I was the vice president of graduate students, which of course at that point I was trying to help out as well. The point I'm trying to make is, for me, this is just something I've been doing for like well over a decade. But then at the same time,
you're not new to this.
Yeah, so it was just one of those things where like, even if RCI was like, bro, you need to focus on your work, I'll probably like, cool, well, when I'm not working and I'm not doing things that y'all doing, I'm just going to be doing this anyway. Hence why even like later on today, I'm going to go, I'm teaching biology at Wake Tech because that's what I like to teach. And of course, because of the fact that I came from a background where, you know, I went to community colleges. I went to community college and took some community college courses, and I met really awesome instructors who really helped me understand things. And on top of that, instructors who actually look like me, which is very rare to find. Mm-hmm. It was a situation where I kind of want to do the same thing to see if I can help people again who look like me and who maybe don't have the funds or maybe just don't want to do a 4-year institution. I feel like you kind of got to go where you think that the people that you want to help are, and that's why I'm there. And that's why I'm also affiliate professor at North Carolina A&T. So RTI, you know, this is of course I found my niche, because it was funny. I when I was even applying for the job and everything, and they're asked, and even afterwards, I was asking about, hey, is there any teaching capabilities, or is there any way I can kind of do any kind of outreach here? And they're like, we really don't do that, but you might be able to find something. And sure enough, within the first year, I was definitely finding, I was able to connect with people who are actually doing things with HBCUs and things like that. So I would say basically, even if you can't find it at like the institution or at the job that you're at, you can always find ways to give back or find ways to help better your community. And on top of that, they're always, almost everybody, every one of those outlets are always welcoming new people, as long as you have the passion to do it. I don't really know where my passion came from per se, but it ain't going anywhere, obviously.
The last question that we have, I've learned so much about you today, and I'm honestly a little inspired. So I would like to know, what advice would you give to your younger self, just in terms of, I don't know, things that would make things easier for you, or maybe to discuss, like, maybe you would tell your younger self what imposter syndrome is and how to get around it. But yeah, I'd like to know what advice would you give your younger self in order to make kind of your journey smoother or better in some way?
I would say, guess it depends on how old Javan was. But I think one of the things I would probably tell him is, it's okay to kind of be who you want to be in the grand scheme of things. And it's okay to have big dreams and basically things of that nature. I never, like, between however old I was when I first started, I guess probably thinking, up until now, I never really felt like I can do anything. I always felt like I'm just going to be capable of doing just enough to get by. So I was always, basically most of my life, I was always very scared that the good things that do happen to me will disappear, because I never had the capabilities of doing them. So eventually somebody, and again, which goes into imposter syndrome, but of course, I tell a young Javan that you probably won't know what the hell that means. So I'm just going to say it this way. But I think it's okay to actually like have your dreams and have big dreams and actually be excited and happy about these things, and not just kind of be fearful that something bad's going to happen along the way and everything. Just kind of look at the positives. Don't focus too much on the negatives. That's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing I would say is, obviously I'm talking with you right now, little Javan. That means that you achieved most of your dreams. So with that being said, I don't know. If anything, just keep dreaming bigger, because at this point in time, one of the things I've been asking myself was, what am I supposed to do now? I kind of got up to the point where I thought I was supposed to stop, but I don't have any goals and desires of stopping right now. So I need to figure out bigger and better things. I ain't going to be no Elon Musk, but at the same time, I need more projects, more things to do. So hopefully, Javan, if I do get a chance to talk to him, will become inspired and come up with better and more interesting things in the future. I don't know. Of course, I got real meta, but that's kind of how I think anyway.
Well, I'm definitely inspired, and a large reason why we want to continue to, highlight Black scientists in the computational field is so that we can serve as inspiration to others. So you coming on and talking about your journey is probably going to inspire, hopefully, a younger fleet of scientists before you and show them what goals and things they should aspire to. So thank you.
Yeah. And especially I appreciate you sharing every aspect, like the reality of what it is like to navigate a nonlinear path, and not just the achievements and everything that goes well, but the reality for a lot of people also who are told that like STEM might not be for them, or that this is too difficult for them, is that it does get difficult. And I think for me, I had a hard time grappling with failure and not attaching it to who I am and my personal self-worth. So thank you for that extra inspiration and affirmation in my journey as well. And I hope also other people are inspired.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I will say this. I'm not ashamed to say it, but you go to therapy, talk to people, work yourself out. It's better about life. But I remember one thing that my therapist always told me. She was like, "Yeah, you kind of a weird duck because it was like you're so at ease with failing at things." And I told her, I was like, "Yeah, I feel more comfortable when I'm failing at things because at that point I know how to like beat it next time, and I understand it better. I understand the process better. So I'm not saying I just want to fail at everything, but for me personally, and again, from what she kind of took from it and everything, from what, our conversations and stuff, it was just like, yeah, you will fail at things and get like double motivation to do different, apply different things, which obviously goes into like the scientific method. I am a scientist, like, so no, I always tell people, don't be scared to fail at stuff. There's nothing wrong with failure. I think it's more about how you fail. If you fail and you stay failed, then at that point, like, okay, let's assess some things. But if you fail and you apply what you learn to it, all you got is time at that point in time. Just do it again, try it again. I mean, I failed at basically everything I've tried at least once.
So I'm going to just wrap up. Thanks so much for joining us today, Dr. Carter. We really enjoyed learning about your career path, your outreach efforts, and we wish you luck in your future endeavors. And hopefully we get to see you again in our seminar series, our BlackInCompBio seminar series, and where you can talk more about your research. To our listeners, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. Until next time.
The Black Women in Computational Biology Network is an online networking platform accelerating opportunity at the intersection of biology, math, and computer science worldwide. This podcast is produced, edited, and published independently by Janae Adams and Melissa Minto. We'd like to thank our community at Cambridge Innovation Center, Philadelphia for their studio resources as well. Find out more at blackwomencompbio.org or get a jumpstart on all things BWCB at our Linktree link, which you can find at linktr.ee/BWCB.